I want to tell you about a woman named Danielle. She is 31 years old. She lives in Columbus, Ohio, with her 2 kids, ages 4 and 7. She works as a certified nursing assistant at a long-term care facility. She makes $14.50 an hour, roughly $30,160 a year before taxes. Danielle is not living well, but she is surviving. Her rent is $940 a month. She receives $412 a month in SNAP benefits, what most people still call food stamps. Her kids are covered by Medicaid, so she doesn't pay for doctor visits, prescriptions, or dental cleanings. Or the inhaler her youngest needs for his asthma. She receives a childcare subsidy through the Childcare and Development Fund, covering 80% of her daycare costs, saving her $800 a month. And she qualifies for a housing choice voucher that knocks $220 off her rent. If you add all of that up, Danielle's total effective income comes to approximately $52,000 a year. She is not comfortable, not saving, but the math works. The kids eat, the lights stay on. She gets 4 hours of sleep and does it all again tomorrow. Then something good happens. Danielle's supervisor pulls her aside. She is being promoted to shift lead. The new position comes with a raise. She will now make $18 an hour. That is an annual salary of $37,440, a $7,000 raise. Danielle almost cries. She calls her mom. She tells her kids they are going to be okay. She imagines breathing room. She imagines maybe putting something into savings for the first time in 3 years. She signs the paperwork on a Friday. By the following Wednesday, the math has already started to collapse. Her SNAP benefits are recalculated. Because her gross income increased, her monthly food assistance drops from $412 to $189. That is a loss of $2,676 a year in grocery support. Then the Child Care Subsidy Office sends a letter. Her new income pushes her above the eligibility threshold. She does not lose part of the subsidy, she loses all of it. The full $800 a month she was saving is gone. That is $9,600 a year. Then she gets a notice from the housing authority. Her voucher amount is being reduced. She now owes an additional $160 a month out of pocket. That is another $1,920 a year. Her Medicaid coverage for the kids remains intact for now, but she has been warned. At her next annual review, her household may exceed the income limit for her state, which would push her children onto a marketplace plan with a monthly premium she has never had to budget for. Let me do the math for you. Danielle received a raise of $7,280. In return, she lost $2,676 in food assistance, $9,600 in childcare support, and $1,920 in housing assistance. That is a total benefit loss of $14,196. Subtract her raise, and Danielle is now $6,916 poorer than she was before the promotion. She got a raise, she made more money, and she is now nearly $7,000 further from okay. If you are watching this and your stomach just dropped, it is because you recognize this. The feeling that you did everything right and the ground still moved under your feet. The feeling that the system told you to work harder and climb higher and then punished you. I need you to know that what happened to Danielle is not a glitch. It is not an edge case. It is a structural feature of the American welfare system that economists have studied for decades. And almost nobody talks about it in a way that normal people can understand. So that is what we are going to do right now. We are going to talk about the welfare cliff. We are going to look at the real math. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why. Millions of Americans are trapped in a position where earning more money makes them poorer. And what you can actually do if you find yourself standing on the edge. The welfare cliff is not a metaphor. It is a measurable, graphable, exposed in federal data economic phenomenon. Here's how it works. The United States operates dozens of means-tested benefit programs. Means-tested means your eligibility is determined by how much money you make. If you make below a certain threshold, you qualify. If you make above it, you do not. The major programs include SNAP for food, Medicaid for healthcare, the Childcare and Development Fund for daycare, Section 8 housing vouchers, the Earned Income Tax Credit, the Child Tax Credit, TANF for temporary cash assistance, LIHEAP for utility bills, and WIC for women and infant nutrition. Each of these programs has its own income threshold, its own phase-out schedule, its own rules for household size, state of residence, asset limits, and reporting requirements. And here is the critical problem. These programs were not designed together. They were created at different times by different agencies, under different administrations, with different political goals. Nobody ever sat down and modeled what happens when a single human being is enrolled in 5 or 6 of them simultaneously, and then gets a raise. What happens is the cliff. As your income rises, each program begins to reduce your benefits. Some reduce gradually. Some cut off entirely at a hard threshold. The cumulative effect is that for every additional dollar you earn in wages, you lose some fraction of that dollar in benefits. Economists measure this using a metric called the effective marginal tax rate. This is not your income tax rate. This is the total percentage of each new dollar that disappears when you combine income taxes, payroll taxes, and the reduction or elimination of every benefit you receive. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services published a series of briefs on this exact issue. Their data shows that for families with children whose income falls just above the federal poverty line, the median effective marginal tax rate is 51%. That means for every additional dollar earned, 51 cents vanishes into taxes and lost benefits. But that is the median. The distribution has a long and brutal tail. For families stacked across multiple programs, the effective marginal tax rate can exceed 70%. In some documented cases, it exceeds 100%. 100% means that earning an additional dollar costs you more than $1 in lost benefits. You are literally paying to work more. The National Bureau of Economic Research published a study that modeled lifetime marginal tax rates across income groups. They found that at least 1/4 of all low-income workers in the United States will face a lifetime effective marginal tax rate of 70% or higher. Let me put that in context. The median lifetime marginal tax rate for the top 1% of earners in America is 50%. The poorest workers in the country face a higher effective tax rate on their next dollar earned than the richest people in the country face on theirs. That is not an opinion. That is federal data. Now let me show you what the cliff looks like on a graph, because this is where it becomes visceral. Imagine a chart where the horizontal axis is gross annual income, starting at 0 and going up to about $80,000. The vertical axis is total net resources, meaning your wages plus the cash value of all benefits minus taxes and work-related expenses. For a single mother with 2 children in a typical state, the line rises steadily from 0 to about $28,000. At that point, her total net resources peak at somewhere around $52,000 to $57,000, depending on the state. Then the line drops, not gradually. It falls off a ledge. Between $28,000 and $45,000 in gross income, her total net resources actually decline. She is earning more gross income and receiving less total value. The line does not recover and surpass its previous peak until her gross income reaches somewhere between $55,000 and $65,000. That means there is a dead zone spanning roughly $17,000 of gross income, where every raise, every promotion, every extra hour of overtime makes her objectively worse off. $17,000 of income growth that produces negative returns. That is not a gap, that is a canyon. And millions of families are standing at the edge of it right now, being told to jump. The childcare cliff is the single most devastating component. In most states, the childcare subsidy has a hard cutoff, You either qualify or you do not. There is no gradual phase out. $1 over the threshold and the entire subsidy disappears. For a family paying for 2 children in daycare, that can mean an instantaneous loss of $8,000 to $15,000 in annual support. No other benefit loss comes close to that magnitude. This is why so many parents, disproportionately mothers, make the rational decision to turn down promotions, refuse extra hours, or even ask their employers to reduce their pay. They are not lazy. They are not gaming the system. They are doing math. And the math says that earning more money will hurt their children. So now you understand what the cliff is and how the math works. The next question is why? Why does the system work this way? And the answer is uncomfortable because it reveals that the cliff is not a bug that nobody noticed. It is a consequence of how American social policy has been constructed for over 60 years. And fixing it would require the kind of political coordination that almost never happens. The first reason is program fragmentation. The United States does not have a unified welfare system. It has dozens of separate programs administered by different federal agencies, funded through different congressional appropriations, and implemented by 50 different state governments with their own rules and thresholds. SNAP is run by the Department of Agriculture. Medicaid is run by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Childcare subsidies are run by the Administration for Children and Families. Housing vouchers are run by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The Earned Income Tax Credit is administered by the Internal Revenue Service. Each of these agencies designs its program in isolation. Each sets its own income limits. Each creates its own phase-out schedule. Nobody is responsible for modeling the combined effect on a single family enrolled in all of them. The cliff exists because no single entity owns the problem. It is an orphan of bureaucratic fragmentation. And every attempt to fix it runs into jurisdictional walls between agencies that do not talk to each other and were never designed to. The second reason is political incentive structure. Welfare programs in America have always existed in a state of political tension between 2 competing narratives. One narrative says that benefits should be generous enough to protect vulnerable families from deprivation. The other narrative says that benefits should be structured to incentivize work and prevent dependency. The cliff is what happens when you try to satisfy both narratives simultaneously without spending more money. If you want benefits to phase out as income rises, which satisfies the work incentive crowd, but you also want benefits to be meaningful at the bottom, which satisfies the protection crowd, and you refuse to extend the phase-out range because that would cost more money, which satisfies the fiscal crowd, then you are mathematically forced into a steep phase-out. A steep phase-out is just another name for a high marginal tax rate. And a high marginal tax rate on the poor is just another name for the welfare cliff. Every politician who has ever voted to tighten eligibility requirements without simultaneously extending the phase-out glide path has made the cliff steeper. Every budget negotiation that cut the total allocation for a program without adjusting the income thresholds has made the cliff sharper. This was not done with malice in most cases. It was done with math that nobody in the room was willing to confront honestly. The third reason is the most structurally devastating, and it has to do with how America handles healthcare. In most developed countries, healthcare is universal. It is not tied to your income. It is not tied to your employment. You get sick, you see a doctor, you do not go bankrupt. In the United States, Medicaid provides healthcare coverage for low-income families, and it has one of the hardest cliffs in the entire system. In states that did not expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, the income cutoff for a family of 3 can be as low as 38% of the federal poverty level. Even in expansion states, the cutoff is 138% of poverty. Cross that line and your family loses health care coverage that can be worth $10,000 to $20,000 a year in actuarial value. The Urban Institute documented cases where crossing the Medicaid threshold creates an effective marginal tax rate on a single dollar of Income that exceeds 100,000%. That is not a typo. If your income crosses the threshold by $1, you lose thousands of dollars in healthcare coverage. The marginal tax rate on that $1 is the full value of the lost coverage divided by $1. The result is a number so large it breaks the concept of marginal taxation entirely. And this is why you hear stories of people begging their employers not to give them raises. They are not irrational. They are terrified. Because they know that $1 can take away their child's ability to see a doctor. There is a deeper layer to this that rarely gets discussed, and it involves what economists call the bandwidth tax. Research from Princeton and the University of Chicago has shown that navigating poverty consumes enormous cognitive resources. When you are poor, you are constantly performing mental calculations about which bills to pay, which to defer, how to stretch groceries, how to get to work if the car breaks down, how to keep the lights on until Friday. This cognitive load reduces your capacity for long-term planning, complex decision-making, and impulse control. Now add the welfare cliff to that equation. You are asking people who are already operating at maximum cognitive capacity to model the interaction effects of 6 different benefit programs across 3 different government agencies with different reporting schedules and different income definitions, and to predict with precision whether a raise of $2 an hour will help or hurt them. This is a task that professional economists with PhDs and spreadsheet software find genuinely difficult. And we are asking a single mother working 12-hour shifts to do it in her head while packing lunches at 5 in the morning. The system does not just punish upward mobility. It hides the punishment behind a wall of complexity so dense that most people do not even know they have been punished until the letters start arriving. I am not going to pretend that there are easy answers here. The welfare cliff is a systemic problem that requires systemic solutions, and those solutions require political will that has been absent for decades. But I refuse to leave you with nothing. So let me give you what I can, which is a framework for navigating the cliff as it exists right now, today, in the real world where you actually live. The first strategy is to map your cliff before you hit it. Every state has slightly different income thresholds for every program. You need to know exactly where your cliffs are. Go to your state's Department of Human Services website. Call 211, which is the national helpline for social services. Use the Cliff Dashboard created by the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, which is a free online tool that lets you plug in your state, your household size, your current income, and your benefits, and it will show you a graph of exactly what happens to your total resources as your income rises. Print that graph. Study it. Know where the drop-offs are. This is not optional. This is survival intelligence. You would not drive a mountain road at night without headlights. Do not navigate the benefit system without knowing where the edges are. The second strategy is to negotiate for non-cash compensation instead of wage increases when you are near a cliff. This sounds counterintuitive, but it is one of the most effective tools available. Many benefit programs calculate eligibility based on gross cash income. Employer-provided health insurance, retirement contributions, tuition reimbursement, transit benefits, and flexible spending accounts often do not count as income for benefits purposes. If you are at a point where a $2 raise would push you over a cliff, ask your employer instead for an increased retirement match, better health coverage, paid training, or education benefits. You receive real economic value without triggering a benefit loss. Not every employer will agree, but many will, especially if you explain the situation clearly. And the ones who will not agree are giving you valuable information about whether that job deserves your loyalty. The third strategy is the leap strategy. If you cannot stay below the cliff and you cannot negotiate around it, then you need to jump over it entirely. Remember the graph. There's a dead zone where earning more makes you poorer. But beyond that dead zone, the line starts climbing again. The goal is to avoid lingering in the dead zone. If you are making $30,000 and the cliff bottoms out at $45,000 and does not recover until $60,000, then your target is not a small raise. Your target is a career move that gets you to $60,000 or above in one jump. That might mean going back to school. It might mean getting a certification. It might mean switching industries. It might mean relocating. These are not small moves. They are not easy. But they are the moves that clear the canyon instead of falling into it. The worst possible outcome is a series of small raises that drag you through the dead zone slowly, losing benefits at every step, never earning enough to replace them, and spending years worse off than you were at the bottom. The fourth strategy is to use the cliff period strategically if you must pass through it. If you know you are going to lose benefits temporarily as your income rises, prepare for the transition in advance. While you still